I'm Meredith Preston-McGee. I'm the Secretary General for the Global Centre for Pluralism, and I'm particularly thrilled today to be joined by the Right Honourable Adrienne Clarkson, the 26th Governor General of Canada, and the Chair of the Executive Committee of the Board for the Global Centre for Pluralism, and a lifelong advocate and passionate activist around issues of inclusion. And we're so thrilled, Adrienne, that you could join us today.
It's a pleasure for me to join you. I think it's a wonderful initiative, and I'm really pleased to take part, Meredith. Thank you for asking me.
Thank you. And I think we've got so much that's going on and so many things to talk about that I'm going to dive straight in. I think we are all feeling that the world feels especially fragile now. I know we talked about this last year, but even in the short 6 months with the COVID crisis, with the social movements in the US showing us how critical it is to be addressing systematic racism, police brutality, other forms of exclusion right now, global poverty on the rise. The issues of pluralism, of inclusion, of diversity are more threatened than ever before. So just maybe we could start with a few of reflections from your side on where do we find ourselves in this moment?
What I think is very interesting about a crisis is that it's a crisis, but it also reveals what your society is. And each of societies all over the world now dealing with this pandemic is having their cracks revealed. So it's not as though we're more fragile. We're always fragile. We kid ourselves in times where the economy is booming, where things seem to be good, where we're doing well in our foreign policy, where if we're a developed country, where we are doing well in every possible way, and we win at the Olympics, and we think we're kind of undefeatable. In fact, we are very fragile, very imperfect human beings. What the pandemic has done is to make us understand that we have to look at certain fragilities in our own society. And the one that come up for me the most, and one that I think we had not paid attention to and tried to brush under the carpet, was what we do about older people and aging, and the way we look after older people and our health system as it relates to that. And certainly in the developed countries, we have seen the horrible cracks in our system and what we thought was really very privileged, etc. What the old people, and I'm 81, so I count myself among them. Old are not fragile. I just am very lucky that I'm not. But older people are not treated well in our society. What was the point of developing all our science to keep people from dying early, from helping them recover from strokes, helping them if they have Parkinson's, helping them if they have arthritis, if when they go into a home where they are supposed to be looked after, they are neglected or abused? And this is one of the things, the cracks that has shown to me that our society has to deal with. It's a human thing, and I think it's dreadful.
How can we be more convincing and make the case that pluralism really is the only path to a more successful, resilient society for everyone?
Well, I think if we have examples of societies in which everybody plays their part and is accepted for what they can give and what their individual gifts and possibilities are, then we have a start there. And I think that Canada, if I can say that, has a start because we have become an immigrant nation after the Second World War. We were just as racist, as ugly as anybody else until starting about 1945-46. Look, I was a refugee, Chinese, came from Hong Kong, and my name is in a register in British Columbia. I have had sent it to me by a PhD student as Adrienne Ploy, that was my maiden name, age 9, girl, in the Chinese Exclusion Act book, okay? So I was not supposed to be here. I only got here because of the war, because the Red Cross ship brought us, threw us on the shore. Like many people, I'm part of the flotsam and jetsam and the possible rejects that happened during a war. So every time I see anything like that, every time there is a Rohingya or a Syrian exclusion or anything, I feel it in a way that I suppose is different from other people. I don't look at it as, oh, how can I help to fix that? I don't look at it from my, social work kind of background. I look at it from I was there once and I am no longer there. And why am I no longer there? Because I came to a country that adjusted to me.
It got me thinking, particularly in preparation for talking to you about this and your work with the media, of where you see the role of the media in this, in bringing some of this to light so that people are seeing the different stories, like the stories that you're telling, so that we can all have a shared understanding of what's really going on, so that we can all participate more actively in how to change it.
Well, the media is going through an enormous revolution. I mean, for one thing, what we call the social media, the Twitter, Instagram, all of those things, the way in which people receive their news is so instant and instantaneous and often completely unedited, raw, etc. I was brought up and had my life in a world where we had parameters to what we understood what journalism was. There was a story or a thing that had happened, and your duty was to go out and find out whether that thing, A, really happened, B, why it happened, who was responsible, what you would do about it, and what you thought, society should know about it. That was what you worked at when you were a journalist. And now it seems that, and especially as we do in Canada, a porous border with a country where there is a person who has no understanding of any kind of humanity or education or whatever, who is their leader, we now get this crazy stuff spewing forth, not only from all sorts of people, but from him, from a leader. And we have to say, the media cannot just say, give us back our old standards, our old way of doing things. The media has to get very savvy about how they're going to do this. They have to be able to use the social media. They have to be able to work, unfortunately, within this 24-hour news cycle. The other thing I would hope something good would come out of it is perhaps to cover smaller communities in our countries. Because in smaller communities, people are closer to each other. I think that there's an emphasis always sometimes when there's a conglomeration of money for media that they want to cover only politics. So in Ottawa, where you're sitting, Meredith, there is a huge press gallery to cover, a little bit of information. There is a huge amount of information in our country, which is covered by a little tiny group of press. And that is because of course, the interest of the journalist is to go where the power is, and maybe to get a scandal or to bring down the government or to do any of those exciting kind of things, which presumably you could do as a journalist, but maybe that's not what we need, not all that we need now, because what we need is the ability to reach out to each other and find out how we are all thinking. Well, what I found very interesting about this COVID crisis is on our national news every night, we have all these expert doctors who are epidemiologists, who are infectious disease experts, who are head of emergency rooms, etc. And it's so wonderful because compared to, say, 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, they are of every color, of every hue, brown, black, yellow, of every unpronounceable name, of every kind of diversity is there on the news, and nothing is made of it. This person is the head of something at Mount Sinai. This person is the head of, and they're not white, they're not male, and that to me is gratifying. The male part I have to bring up is my footnote, is that I think females are frequently, when we talk about diversity and we talk about inclusion, we think of ourselves as all one rolling on human race. But I, as a second generation feminist of the 70s, have to always say that women are the ones that I always look to think of where they're going to make their breakthroughs. How have they been held back? And they always are held back. Because the patriarchy, I'm using the language of feminism because that's I believe, the right one. The patriarchy does not want you to break through. The patriarchy is not only men, but the standards that men have held for society and so-called civilization for centuries now.
And I think when you describe sort of issues with the patriarchy, I think there's a lot of parallels as well with the issues around systemic racism, because these are systemic issues that become invisible to those who benefit from it. And people, it isn't about intent, it's about the impact that these systems are having on exclusion of women, exclusion of minorities, and so forth. And it's figuring out how we have those really complicated conversations. And personally, I feel in a strange way in the midst of this crisis, sort of hopeful that it's forcing us not to look away, and it's forcing us to have conversations that a year ago, I think some of us would feel wouldn't be possible. And so I wonder, just Adrienne, as we sort of conclude, what is inspiring you right now? What is making you hopeful that this is potentially a portal into a better future, a necessary set of crises that we're going through to get us to a better place?
Well, I think what's giving me hope is that people are having time to stop and reflect. And a lot of the people around me and my friends and so on, we were always so frantic because we were traveling all the time. We were, we were going, yes, all right, I can come to Ottawa for the day, that's wonderful, I'll do a meeting, etc. But getting through the airport, getting on the plane, getting off the plane, going through the airport, it's so tedious. And many of us, I think, are feeling, gosh, we have a lot more time to think and to organize ourselves. And maybe we don't need to do all these one-day things. Maybe we don't have to all be like that together. On the other hand, I don't think technology necessarily means that we're together. I don't think that Zooming necessarily means that we're together. And mistakes can be made because of that, because it's not the same as sitting around a table by any means. And that, I think, none of us will ever want to give up. But I think what's come out of it is that we are going to take stock of ourselves and say, what is really important here? How are we going to deal with each other in this world? We were brought up in an atmosphere that was not about money or making money and having that as the supreme value in life. That was not the value. I can tell you, Kent Street Public School in Ottawa, where I grew up, it was not the value. We had, because it was a public school too, we had people from what was then LeBreton Flats, which was a very deprived area, and there were still not indoor plumbing in a lot of those houses at LeBreton Flats. And people came to school in the same clothes day after day after day for 3 or 4 or 5 days, and then you'd see them in something else or something from their brother who you saw at the schoolyard. It was not a society in Canada where people thought of money as such. And I think we thought if we survived, as a country, if we, it's our country. To me, it was always about doing something for your country. And I was very lucky. I grew up in a time of the post-war period, and I was in grade 7 when the Declaration of Human Rights was done up at the UN. And our teacher said in social studies, Dr. John Humphreys is a Canadian and he has written this, and we all read it and we thought, oh, how wonderful, and we felt so implicated. And then there was Lester Pearson, and I'm sorry, it sounds in a way romantic, but it wasn't romantic. It gave us a goal. It gave us the idea that after the war we were a poor country by our own standards, but a rich country compared to the Europeans who were decimated and who came to us in floods. So we got loads and loads of immigrants then, and the country really changed and shifted. And so I've lived through that, and I've lived through our coming past our racism, which we had very much, very, very much. I mean, as a Chinese, I know that. I know what they did to the horrible thing they did to the Japanese during the Second World War, and anti-Semitism, the anti-Black feeling, and people were casually anti-Semitic, not casually anti-Catholic, and not casually anti-Protestant, which in Canada has played a big, big role, both in our history and in the way we formed ourselves. So we've had both religious and what you'd call racial bigotry in the country, and we have gone past that. We have gone past it by accepting immigrants. I mean, we have really been able to we brought in those Vietnamese. We didn't have, I don't know if there were 10 Vietnamese in Canada when we brought in those tens of thousands of Vietnamese. And we said, we have to, they're drowning in the sea. If we don't take them, who's going to take them? And then we developed this wonderful citizen thing of adopting individual families. Five sets of people or families would adopt them, and we kept that up with the Syrian model. It's something that we have developed out of a kind of, you know, this could have happened to me. I think that's the greatest important thing to teach children, is that you are not special just, you know, because you happen to have two parents who love you and a nice brother or a pretty sister. You are somebody who actually needs to say to themselves, I have got myself in this particular space because so many other people have lived their lives well in order to get me here, or have sacrificed, or have given their lives, or have done all of those things. It doesn't just happen. And I think I'm very concerned if children don't mingle in terms of their economic backgrounds too. And as the cities get bigger and so on, you often find that children don't mingle. And I hope very much that we will understand that we were able to accept people and bring people in because we thought we can be all Canadian. And when people asked him, you know, used to ask me before I became Governor General, and when I was in television and on, and people would know me, they'd say, you know, well, are you Chinese? And I'd say, yes, I am from China originally, but I'm Canadian. And I've always felt that. I've always felt that. There's nothing has ever made me not feel like that in Canada. I've always felt that I was Canadian. And I think that's important. And I'd love to see that as a category in our census form. That, you know, we have ethnic backgrounds apparently, and a lot of people don't. But I'd like to see Canadian as the one, so that people just identify themselves as Canadian. They don't care whether they're a quarter Indian, half Jewish, or, you know, quarter Irish. That becomes an interesting personal curiosity for you. Doing 23andMe or Ancestry is interesting because it tells you your narrative, and every human being wants to be the hero of their own novel in a way, and to know what the setting is of that novel. But they don't have to be exclusionary because of that. In fact, it makes you feel part. And when because Margaret Atwood was a dear friend of mine, said, you've got to do 23andMe, you'll find out such wonderful things. And I did 23andMe, and I discovered, I didn't know a lot of it, but I discovered I had 3% Sardinian and 5% Portuguese. And that was really fascinating, because then it made me think of all those Portuguese who went, you know, to the Far East in the 17th century and 18th, not that many, but they certainly had an effect. And it made the world seem inclusive to me. So if it makes you feel inclusive, I think those things are very, very good.
And I love this vision of us coming through this crisis with more of a focus on the humanity and the inclusion and the solidarity, and really kind of going back to basics a little bit about what's important in our society, moving away from the sort of a consumerist capitalist model to a humanist, hopefully pluralist model in our society.
And I think the emphasis on our fragility as human beings is a good thing. Because people think, you know, because I'm rich enough, because I can travel, because I got this, because I got that, because I possess this, etc., that therefore I'm invincible. We are not invincible. We are all going to die. We are all fragile human beings, and we all have different kinds of fragilities. And I think the best of us is shown when we understand those, not only in ourselves, but that we understand and forgive them in others. And other people have weaknesses, and they have prejudices, and they are loathsome and awful, etc. But you've got to make room for them. Society is made up not of people that you like, but of people that you don't necessarily even want to stand in the bus shelter with, but they are part of society, and they may feel the same way about you. And if you don't make something with them, you're going to have nothing. You're going to have nothing. You're going to have no way of ever assuming that something can be done by a lot of people together. And that is what really, I think, is going to come out of this, that we are going to understand that we've all been in this together. We've never been in something so together before. Wars are not like that. Everybody's on a side, right? But this, we're all in together because it's about us, each of us as a human being.
And that solidarity shows us a new path forward, I hope. And that's a really inspiring note to end on. And Adrienne, it's just such a pleasure as ever to talk to you. And thank you so much for taking the time to share your thoughts and insights for the Pluralism and Pandemic Portal. Thank you so much.
I enjoyed it so much, Meredith. Thank you for asking me.
Thanks.